Would you believe that there are fish, probably close to where you live, that are living fossils, and that show us the traits of fish that lived millions of years ago? So what are living fossils? And what traits do they share with ancient creatures? What specific creatures am I talking about? How can such ancient creatures still be successful in a world full of modern competitors, predators, and prey? And why are they in trouble now? A living fossil is a creature that is still alive today, yet strongly resembles and has the traits of a creature that lived millions of years ago. The ancient traits that I'll be talking about are body armor, a skeleton made of cartilage rather than bone, an ancient asymmetrical style of caudal fin or tail fin, and a primitive digestive system with a spiral valve. First, let's look at body coverings. To put things in context, let's do some time travel and think about ancient body coverings. Millions of years ago, primitive fish called ostracoderms had body armor, notably a head shield, made of solid bone. It was heavy but extremely protective. They had round mouths, but not jaws that they could open and close. They weren't good swimmers, but they used their tails to drive their faces into the mud so that they could eat the benthic organisms there. There were a number of different varieties of ostracoderms, but the biological strategy of all of them was to be well protected at the expense of mobility and flexibility. The human equivalent of that might be the knights of old, extremely well protected but limited in mobility and flexibility. Many of you may be somewhat familiar with the geological time scale. In a nutshell, the deeper you dig into our planet or into this chart, the older are the fossils, because older fossils were buried first, with newer sediments and fossils deposited on top. The rocks and fossils are then carbon or radio dated, yielding the numbers you see in this chart in terms of millions of years ago. Almost everybody saw the movie Jurassic Park, so let's use dinosaurs to get our bearings. Dinosaurs roamed the Earth in the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods, from about 245 million years ago to about 67 million years ago. So when were the ostracoderms, with their bony body armor, alive? They first appeared early in the Ordovician period, as you can see by the orange arrow, and they became extinct late in the Devonian period, as you can see by the height of the orange bar. Let's pick another ancient fish. Placoderms had armor made of thinner, smoother articulating plates on the front part of their bodies. They had jaws that they could open and close for better predation, and they had better fins for swimming. Here's a closer look at the articulating plates that made up the armor of a placoderm, rather than having a solid bony shield. There was even a hinge that allowed them to open their mouths very wide despite the armor. They might have sacrificed some protection in terms of their armor, but they gained mobility and flexibility. The human equivalent of this might be the armor used by archers, who had to be more maneuverable than knights. In terms of further protection, some placoderms had scales on the back of their bodies, and some did not. Placoderms appeared later in the fossil record than the ostracoderms, as you can see by the brownish arrow. But they also became extinct at the end of the Devonian period, as you can see from the height of the brownish bar. What about sharks? Signs of sharks first appeared in the fossil record at about the same time as the ostracoderms, in the early Ordovician, but sharks have survived all the way to the present time. Early sharks were simple creatures with mouths at the ends of their faces and fins that were less developed for swimming. Later sharks tended to be larger with underslung mouths and more developed fins for better swimming and better predation, but they were always clearly sharks, and they had a complete body covering of placoid scales that resembled tiny teeth. The human equivalent of a shark's body covering might be chain mail, still protective, but lighter and more maneuverable than a continuous rigid covering. If chain mail doesn't seem as aggressive as having tiny teeth all over your body, then how about the spiky look of this punk wardrobe? What about the modern bony fish that are so abundant and successful today, such as rainbow trout and yellow perch? Some lack scales altogether, but most have a body covering of thin, flexible scales. There are cycloid scales that are basically circular and show annual rings of growth, and there are ctenoid scales that are similar except that they have a rougher texture on one side. For example, the rainbow trout has cycloid scales, whereas the yellow perch has ctenoid scales. Check these out the next time you have a fish in hand. The biological strategy of this body covering is to be fast, maneuverable, and efficient, like the body covering of these soldiers. Bony fish have been extremely successful. Their fossil record starts at about the same time as the placoderms, but they have fanned out to become the numerically dominant form of fish life on this planet. What fish am I calling a living fossil? It's the sturgeon. Sturgeons are elongate, armored, bottom-feeding fish that find food with their sensory barbels, and they suck that food up into their toothless mouths. They've been specialists in this lifestyle for millions of years. And, as mentioned, they've hardly changed in all this time. The sturgeon displays traits of ancient fish. For instance, sturgeons have body armor made of bony plates. Bony armor is associated with ancient fish, in contrast to the thin, flexible scales of modern bony fish. The sturgeon clearly falls in with ancient fish in this regard. A second ancient trait concerns the substance that makes up the skeleton. The skeletons of ancient fish are made of cartilage, as opposed to the skeletons of modern bony fish. Again, the sturgeon fits right in with the ancient fish. Modern fish are full of bones, as you'll know if you've ever eaten one. A third ancient trait concerns the structure of the tail or caudal fin. The placoderm body also extended into the tail or caudal fin, as you can see at the green arrow on the right. The shark's body also extends into the tail or caudal fin, as you can see from the ancient shark up top, from the modern shark on the left, and from the shark skeleton on the right. In all of these cases, the top of the tail fin is not the same as the bottom of the tail fin, and this arrangement is referred to as a heterocircle tail fin. What about modern bony fish? The top and bottom of the tail fin are the same. There's no body entering into the tail fin, so it is referred to as a homocircle tail fin. As you can see from the skeleton, the body of the modern bony fish ends at the red arrow, and the entire tail is made of flexible fin rays. So again, the sturgeon falls in with the ancient fish. A fourth ancient trait involves having a spiral valve in the digestive system. Sturgeons and sharks have spiral valves in their digestive systems. Placoderms might have had them too, but it's hard to be certain when working with fossils. A spiral valve looks like a spiral shape within the tube of the digestive system. It looks like an Archimedes screw. Humans use Archimedes screws to move water or grain uphill, or they can be used to produce power when water runs through them going downhill. Sturgeons and sharks use them to slow the passage of food through their simple digestive systems. In comparison, modern bony fish lack spiral valves but have more elaborate digestive systems, as illustrated on the right. So where do sturgeons appear in the geological timescale? So here's the timescale the way we had set it up so far. The first sturgeon-like fish appeared in the Jurassic, in the middle of the dinosaur era, as shown by the dark green arrow and bar. The first sturgeons that you would recognize today appeared in the Cretaceous, towards the end of the dinosaur era, as shown by the light green arrow and bar. So where did sturgeons come from? It appears that they evolved from the bony fish of that time. In fact, the first sturgeon-like fish had bony skeletons, but they reverted to cartilage, possibly because they still had the genes to do so, and because cartilage is lighter, more flexible, and capable of continued growth to very large sizes. Let's consider some facts about modern-day sturgeons. There are 28 species alive today, and they live in the rivers, lakes, and coastal waters of North America and Europe. Some live their entire lives in saltwater. Some live their lives in freshwater. Most sturgeons live in saltwater, but migrate up rivers to spawn in freshwater. Sturgeons can grow to a length of up to 23.6 feet. That's the length of 1.5 canoes. And they can live for up to 150 years. That's a long time for a fish. Let's meet some modern-day sturgeons. I'll show you 6 sturgeons that could be near you, in bodies of water or in stores in terms of their products. The lake sturgeon is a freshwater fish. It locates benthic prey with its barbels, and it sucks food into its toothless mouth. It grows to a length of 7.3 feet or 2.2 meters. Its genus name is Accipenser, as you'll see several times with closely related sturgeons. Its species name is Fulvescens, in reference to its yellowish color. The Atlantic sturgeon lives in the Atlantic Ocean from New Brunswick to Florida. It lives in brackish water or salty water and migrates up freshwater rivers to spawn. It's a benthic feeder, and it grows to lengths of 15 feet or 4.6 meters. Again, the genus name is Accipenser. Its species name, Oxyrhynchus, is likely in reference to its pointy nose. The white sturgeon is Accipenser transmontanus, in reference to living on the far side of the mountains. It lives in the Pacific Ocean from Alaska to California. It lives in brackish water or salty waters, and it migrates up freshwater rivers to spawn, although some populations are completely landlocked. It's a benthic feeder, and it grows to 20 feet or 6.1 meters. The remaining 3 sturgeons are not as closely related as the first 3. The pellid sturgeon lives in large freshwater rivers like the Mississippi. It likes deep, swift, murky water over gravel. It vacuums up aquatic insects when it's young. It eats small fish when it's older. It grows to a length of 6 feet or 1.8 meters. The Kaluga sturgeon lives in or near the Amur River basin of Northeast Asia. It lives in salt water, but it returns to the Amur River to breed, where it spawns over gravel or sandy gravel. Young Kalugas initially hunt for insects and shrimp. Later, they hunt fish. They can grow to a length of 18.6 feet or 5.6 meters. The Beluga sturgeon is mostly found in the Caspian and Black Sea basins of Northeast Asia. They live in salt water but return to freshwater river basins to breed, where they spawn over clean gravel. Young sturgeons look like this and suck up benthic invertebrates. Later, they transform into monsters that look like this. They become massive and they hunt fish. They can grow to 23.5 feet or 7.2 meters. Why haven't sturgeons changed much after millions of years? Well, they're benthic specialists and they're excellent at what they do. There's lots of food down there, and they're good at finding it with their barbels and sucking it up with their special mouths. They are armored for protection, and they don't need to be fast. They're not chasing anything, and almost nothing is chasing them. They grow to very large sizes and old ages. In other words, very little of their lives is spent in a tiny, vulnerable state. Some of their biological traits might even slow the process of evolution. Here's some speculation. For instance, many sturgeons don't breed until they're 15 to 20 years old, and many do not breed every year. That makes for long generation times, compared to fish that breed young and often, which means that genetic changes would be very slow. However, they have managed to adapt to various saltwater and freshwater habitats. How can they compete with modern fish? Well, the same traits that got them to the present time continue to be advantages. Benthic specialists, lots of food down there, good at finding it, armored, large sizes, long lives. Those are all advantages. In addition to that, when they do breed, they lay tremendous numbers of eggs. This would allow them to flood the market with sturgeons, which means that there would be plenty of survivors to grow to large, fertile sizes that are relatively immune to predation. So why are sturgeons in trouble now? They are valued for their roe, in other words their eggs, and their meat. Their roe is processed into caviar, as you can see in the can on the left and the spoon beside it. Caviar sells for $45 to $1,000 per ounce. This leads to overfishing for sturgeon where it's legal and poaching where it's not. Not everybody gets to eat caviar, but many more eat sturgeon meat prepared in various ways. The royalties of some countries, such as England and Denmark, thought that sturgeons were so special that they declared them royal fish, the property of the monarch. Sturgeons are also in trouble because they need gravel beds for spawning, and spawning beds are silting up because of human activities such as farming, forestry, and urban development. Industry can play a part. Here are some young sturgeons being sucked up by a poorly designed intake pipe. Sturgeons are vulnerable to pollution because they are greatly exposed to it during their very long lives. Here you see a eutrophied body of water over-enriched with fertilizers and sewage. And here you see an oil spill. As well, sturgeons can be prevented from migrating to their spawning grounds by dams. So why do we care about sturgeons? Well, their eggs and meat are valuable and could be sustainable if managed carefully. They are powerful sports fish. Hooking one of the big ones must be like hooking a submarine. This can lead to recreational opportunities and tourism dollars. So sturgeons can provide incentive to improve our waterways and fisheries. They also serve as windows on the ancient past. We need to care about sturgeons because most sturgeons are vulnerable, threatened, or endangered now. Of the 6 sturgeons I introduced you to, 1 is endangered, 2 are vulnerable, and 3 are critically endangered according to the IUCN Red List. Fortunately, various organizations are helping, such as the World Sturgeon Conservation Society, the North American Sturgeon and Paddlefish Society, Sturgeons for Tomorrow, and there may be other organizations near you. Various organizations are studying, cultivating, stocking, and promoting sturgeon conservation. Now that you know more about these living fossils, I hope you will give more thought to the value of sturgeons and wildlife in general. If you want to know more about environmental science, I have an inexpensive and highly rated course at Udemy. I'll put the link in the More area below the video.